In the darkness before dawn, when the jungle holds its breath and the last stars cling to the western horizon, there exists a moment of perfect stillness. It is in this threshold between night and day that ancient voices whisper across the centuries, carrying with them a message that the modern world has misunderstood for generations. The Maya, those brilliant astronomers and mathematicians who built pyramids aligned to celestial perfection, who tracked the movements of Venus with accuracy that would not be matched for 1,000 years, left behind a prophecy that sent tremors of fear through our contemporary civilization. December 21st, 2012, a date that became synonymous with apocalypse, with the end of all things, with catastrophe written in the stars. But the Maya never predicted the end of the world. They predicted something far more profound, far more beautiful, and infinitely more relevant to the age we are entering now. Tonight, as you settle into the gentle embrace of sleep, allow yourself to drift back through time, to walk among limestone temples rising from emerald canopies, to stand beneath skies so clear that the river of stars seems close enough to touch. Let the wisdom of an ancient people wash over you like warm rain, bringing with it an understanding that transcends fear, that speaks instead of cycles and renewal, of the eternal dance between darkness and light, destruction and creation, ending and beginning. Close your eyes now and breathe deeply, for we are about to journey into the heart of time itself. The story begins not with prophecy, but with a fundamentally different way of perceiving reality itself, a worldview so ancient and so profound that it challenges everything our modern consciousness takes for granted about the nature of time, existence, and humanity's place within the great turning of cosmic cycles. To understand what the Maya truly predicted, we must first learn to see time as they saw it, not as a straight line marching inexorably from past to future, but as a great cosmic wheel, turning endlessly through darkness and light, each rotation bringing new ages of creation and transformation, each completion marking not an ending, but a threshold between what was and what will be. Imagine yourself standing in the central plaza of a Maya city, perhaps the great Tikal rising from the jungle canopy, or Copan nestled in its verdant valley. In those hushed hours before sunrise, when the world holds its breath between night and day, the air is thick with moisture, carrying the scent of copal incense that drifts from temple doorways where priests have been keeping vigil through the night. Above you, the sky is a canvas of extraordinary clarity, unmarred by the light pollution that veils the heavens in our modern age. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a luminous river, what the Maya called the Wakachan, the raised-up sky, the cosmic pathway along which gods and ancestors traveled between the earthly realm and the celestial domains beyond human reach. The Maya understood something that our linear, progress-obsessed culture has largely forgotten. They knew that time was not a resource to be spent or saved, not a commodity measured in productivity and efficiency. Time, for the Maya, was alive. It breathed with the rhythm of celestial movements, pulsed with the heartbeat of creation itself. Each day was a living entity, a divine presence that arrived bearing its own character, its own gifts and challenges, its own place in the intricate web of cosmic forces that governed all existence. The word they used, keen, meant simultaneously day, sun, and time, a linguistic fusion that reveals their holistic understanding of temporal and celestial reality as inseparable aspects of a unified cosmos. To the Maya astronomer-priests who spent countless nights tracking the movements of stars and planets from their temple observatories, time was something to be read, interpreted, and harmonized with, much as a musician must attune themselves to the rhythm and melody of a great symphony already in progress. These learned individuals, trained from childhood in the sacred sciences of mathematics and astronomy, possess knowledge that we are only beginning to fully appreciate in our modern age. They could predict eclipses centuries in advance, could track the synodic period of Venus with breathtaking precision, could calculate the length of the solar year to within seconds of our contemporary measurements, all without the aid of telescopes or electronic computing devices. The temples themselves were not merely places of worship, but served as sophisticated astronomical observatories, their doorways and windows aligned to capture the light of the rising sun on solstices and equinoxes, their stairways numbering the days of the sacred calendar, their very architecture encoding mathematical and astronomical knowledge in stone. When sunlight streamed through a carefully positioned aperture to illuminate a specific glyph or altar on a particular day, it was not coincidence, but intentional design, a marriage of human ingenuity and cosmic order that allowed the Maya to maintain their sacred connection to the rhythms of the universe. This relationship with the cosmos was not abstract or theoretical, but intimately connected to every aspect of Maya life. The planting and harvesting of maize, the sacred crop that sustains civilization and featured prominently in creation mythology, followed astronomical cycles. The timing of warfare and royal rituals was determined by the movements of Venus, whose appearances as morning and evening star marked auspicious and inauspicious periods for different undertakings. Religious ceremonies coordinated with celestial events, ensuring that human activities remained aligned with divine intentions as manifested through the predictable movements of heavenly bodies. The priests who maintained this knowledge occupied a crucial position in Maya society, serving as intermediaries between the human community and the cosmic forces that governed existence. Their ability to predict celestial phenomena demonstrated their mastery of divine knowledge, legitimizing their authority and ensuring social cohesion through shared participation in ceremonial cycles. These individuals spent years memorizing vast quantities of astronomical data, learning to calculate calendar correlations, studying the hieroglyphic texts that preserved generations of accumulated wisdom about the nature of time and the proper relationship between humanity and cosmos. In the quiet hours before dawn, these priest astronomers would climb the steep stairways of their temple pyramids, emerging onto platforms high above the sleeping city to observe the sky with trained eyes that could detect subtle variations in celestial patterns. They noted the positions of stars against the horizon, tracked the wandering paths of planets through the constellations, and recorded the phases of the moon and the cycles of Venus in books made from bark paper coated with line plaster, folded like screens and covered with intricate hieroglyphic texts and astronomical tables of stunning complexity and accuracy. This accumulated knowledge formed the foundation of Maya prophecy, which was not supernatural prediction, but rather the application of cyclical patterns observed in celestial mechanics to human affairs. The Maya had noted that certain astronomical configurations coincided with historical events, that cycles repeated themselves at predictable intervals, and that the cosmos moved according to mathematical principles that could be understood and anticipated. From this understanding emerged their system of prophecy, which sought not to predict specific events, but to identify the character and potential of different time periods, the spiritual weather, as it were, that would influence human experience during particular calendar cycles. The concept that time possessed character and quality rather than being merely quantitative measurement represented a profound philosophical insight. In Maya thought, a day occurring in one calendar position carried entirely different energies and possibilities than a day in another position, even though both were 24 hours in duration. This qualitative understanding of time meant that the same action undertaken at different moments could produce vastly different results, not through supernatural intervention, but because of the different cosmic conditions prevailing at those moments. Much as a seed planted in spring will flourish, while the same seed planted in winter will fail to germinate. This worldview created a civilization deeply attuned to rhythm and pattern, to the recognition that all things moved in cycles, that what appeared to be linear progression was actually spiral repetition, each turn of the great wheel bringing new variations on eternal themes: birth and death, planting and harvest, drought and rain, the daily journey of the sun from eastern horizon to western setting, and its nightly passage through the underworld to emerge again triumphant at dawn. All these cycles nested within larger cycles, creating a temporal landscape of extraordinary complexity and beauty. The architecture of Maya timekeeping reflected this layered understanding of cyclical existence through multiple interlocking calendar systems, each measuring different aspects of cosmic rhythm, each contributing to the comprehensive framework through which the Maya organized their experience of temporal reality. The sacred calendar of 260 days, called the Zolkin, meshed with the solar calendar of 365 days, called the Haab, to create a longer cycle of 52 years, at the completion of which elaborate ceremonies celebrated the successful navigation of one complete calendar round and the beginning of another. But beyond these shorter cycles existed a calendar of breathtaking scope and ambition, a system designed to track not merely human lifespans or generations, but cosmic ages themselves, vast stretches of time that dwarfed individual human experience and connected the present moment to creation itself and to future transformations yet to come. This was the long count calendar, the timekeeping system that would eventually generate both the prophecy of 2012 and the profound misunderstanding that surrounded it. To understand the long count calendar is to glimpse the Maya vision of deep time, the recognition that human civilization existed within cosmic processes operating at scales that transcended ordinary comprehension. Imagine sitting in a Maya scribal workshop, surrounded by young students learning the sacred art of timekeeping and astronomical calculation. The master scribe traces glyphs on lime-plastered bark paper, each symbol representing units of time that build upon each other like nested vessels, each container holding the one smaller than itself. The smallest unit, the kin, was a single day, the fundamental quantum of temporal experience. 20 kin made a winal, approximately our month. 18 winal, equaling 360 days, made a ton, close to but not identical with the solar year. 20 ton made a katun, a period of approximately 20 years that served as a significant unit for historical record-keeping and prophecy. 20 katun made a baktun, a cycle of approximately 400 years, a span sufficient to contain multiple human generations, yet still comprehensible within the scope of cultural memory transmitted through oral tradition and written records. The long count began from a creation date that the Maya fixed as 4 Ajal 8 Kumku in their calendar system, corresponding to a date more than 5,000 years before the present in our chronology. From this mythological starting point, the Maya counted forward through the unfolding ages, recording historical events with precise long count dates that allowed for exact calculation of intervals between occurrences separated by centuries. This chronological precision enabled Maya historians to maintain accurate records of dynastic succession, to commemorate royal achievements with monuments bearing long count dates that proclaimed when specific rulers ascended to power, when battles were fought, when important ceremonial events occurred. The system's mathematical elegance derived from its base 20 structure, reflecting the Maya vigesimal counting system that used both fingers and toes as the physical basis for numerical abstraction. This mathematical framework allowed for calculation of immense time periods with relative ease once the principles were mastered. A trained scribe could add or subtract long count dates, could calculate how many days separated one historical event from another, could project forward to determine when significant calendrical cycles would complete and new ones begin. It was this projective capacity, this ability to look forward through time with the same precision that allowed them to look backward, that generated the Maya prophecy regarding the completion of the 13th Baktun. The date that Western calendars record as December 21st, 2012, represented in the long count system the moment when the great cycle of 13 Baktuns, a period of approximately 5,125 years, would complete its rotation and reset to begin again, like the odometer of cosmic time rolling over from one major cycle into the next. But the Maya never suggested this transition would bring apocalypse. To understand their actual beliefs about this momentous calendrical completion, we must delve deeper into their creation mythology, into the stories told in the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiche Maya, which preserved in alphabetic transcription the ancient tales that explained the nature of existence and humanity's place within the cosmic order. These myths reveal a pattern of creation and destruction, of successive world ages that ended and began again, each iteration bringing existence closer to its intended form, each catastrophe serving not as punishment but as necessary transformation in the evolution of consciousness and life. The Popol Vuh tells of the gods gathered in consultation, determining to create beings capable of keeping track of time, of offering prayers and gratitude, of maintaining through ritual and devotion the cosmic balance that sustained existence. Their first attempt produced creatures of mud, formless and incapable of speech or comprehension, beings who dissolved in water and could not hold their shape or fulfill their divine purpose. Dissatisfied, the gods destroyed this first creation and began again. The second attempt created beings of wood, figures that could walk and speak but lacked true consciousness, creatures who possessed the outward form of humanity but not the sacred spark of awareness that would allow them to truly perceive the divine or to act with intentional devotion. These wooden people multiplied across the earth, but they forgot their creators, failed to offer prayers or gratitude, used the gifts of creation thoughtlessly without reverence or respect. For this failure, the gods sent catastrophe upon them, a great flood that destroyed their civilization, though some survivors were said to have fled into the forests and become the monkeys that still inhabit the jungle canopies, their chattering voices a degraded echo of the speech they once possessed. Only with the third creation, when the gods formed humanity from maize dough, grinding yellow corn and white corn together with water to create the sacred substance from which the first 4 humans were molded, did existence achieve its proper form. These maize people possessed consciousness and gratitude, could perceive the divine order of creation, could fulfill their purpose of maintaining cosmic balance through ceremony and devotion. Yet even this creation required adjustment, for the first 4 humans saw too clearly, understood too much, possessed vision that rivaled the gods themselves. To maintain proper cosmic hierarchy, the gods breathed a mist upon the eyes of humanity, clouding their vision so that they could perceive divine truth only imperfectly, ensuring their dependence upon revelation and instruction from sources beyond themselves. This pattern of destruction and recreation, of successive ages each ending in catastrophe but each giving way to a new and improved form of existence, established a fundamental principle in Maya cosmology. Endings were not final, but transformative, necessary stages in the evolution of creation toward its destined perfection. Each world age contained the seeds of its own dissolution, but also the promise of renewal, of continuation in altered form. The catastrophes that destroyed previous creations were not punishments inflicted by angry gods, but natural consequences of imbalance, of existence that had diverged from its proper alignment with cosmic order. Understanding this cyclical view of destruction and creation, this acceptance of transformation through catastrophe, is essential to comprehending what the Maya actually believed about the completion of the 13th Baktun. They did not predict apocalypse in the modern sense of final ending, ultimate destruction, termination of existence. Rather, they anticipated transition, the completion of one cosmic chapter and the beginning of another, a moment of potential transformation when the ordinary fabric of existence might become permeable to divine influence, when humanity might experience directly the presence of forces usually concealed behind the veil of mundane reality. The primary textual evidence for Maya beliefs about the Baktun transition comes from a damaged limestone monument discovered at the archaeological site of Tortuguero in the Mexican state of Tabasco, a site closely connected to the kingdom of Palenque, sharing the same royal emblem glyphs and political connections. Monument 6, as archaeologists designated it, bears a long count inscription commemorating events from the reign of a local ruler named Balam Ajao, who ruled during the 7th century. Within this historical narrative, the text makes a remarkable forward projection to the completion date of the 13th Baktun, making it one of very few ancient Maya texts that explicitly reference this calendrical milestone that would fall more than 1,300 years in the monument's future. The stone itself, unfortunately fragmentary, with crucial portions of the text damaged beyond recovery, has been the subject of intense scholarly debate regarding its proper translation and interpretation. What remains legible of the text indicates that the completion of the 13th Baktun on the Maya date corresponding to our December 21st, 2012, would be marked by an event involving a deity whose name appears as Bolon-Yokte Ku. Scholars have struggled to translate this divine name with certainty, with various interpretations suggesting meanings like 9 support god, god of 9 steps, or god of 9 feet. Though whether this refers to a single deity or a collective group of 9 gods remains a matter of scholarly discussion. Bolon-Yokte Ku appears in other Maya texts, particularly those dealing with creation events, including references to the mythological creation date of the current world age, suggesting this deity's association with cosmic transitions and the establishment of world orders. The damaged and eroded glyphs describing what would happen at the completion of the Baktun have been read in various ways by different epigraphers. Early translations suggested a descent of Bolon-Yokte Ku, which some interpreters seized upon as evidence of apocalyptic prophecy. However, more recent and detailed analyses by epigraphers Sven Gronenmeyer and Barbara McLeod, published after careful study of the badly worn glyphs, suggest a different reading. Their interpretation proposes that the text describes a ceremonial event, possibly an investiture or public display of regalia associated with Bolon-Yokte Ku, a ritual witnessing or celebration of the calendrical completion, rather than a catastrophic supernatural intervention. This interpretation finds support in the monument's overall context. The inscription primarily commemorates the dedication of a shrine, called a pibna, or becoming ripe house, an underground ceremonial structure associated with transformation and renewal. The text appears to be linking the 7th century dedication ceremony to the future completion of the Baktun, establishing a connection between the monument's present and a distant cosmic milestone. Based on what we know of Maya ritual practices and their treatment of significant calendar stations, we might reasonably infer that the monument's creators anticipated appropriate ceremonies would mark the Baktun completion, ceremonies perhaps to be conducted in the very shrine being dedicated, connecting past, present, and future through ritual continuity. It's important to recognize that even prominent Maya scholars acknowledge the uncertainty surrounding this damaged text. David Stewart, one of the leading Maya epigraphers, has noted that the inscription likely tells us more about the local concerns of 7th century Tortorero than about any specific prophecy regarding 2012. The monument may have been using the future Baktun completion primarily as a calendrical reference point, much as we might say an event occurred so many years before or after a millennium marker, without implying any special significance to that millennium date itself. What seems increasingly clear from scholarly consensus is that the monument contains no language suggesting apocalyptic destruction or the ending of human civilization. The text, fragmentary though it is, speaks in terms that appear ceremonial and commemorative rather than fearful or catastrophic. The association with Bolon Yokteku, a deity connected to creation events and cosmic transitions in other Maya texts, could imply that the Maya viewed the Baktun completion as a moment of renewal and cosmic reordering, similar to the mythological creation of the current world age. The Maya who commissioned and carved this monument, living in the 7th century and projecting forward to an event 13 centuries in their future, appear to have anticipated the completion of the 13th Baktun as a significant calendrical station worthy of connection to their contemporary ritual activities, but not as a doomsday to be dreaded or an ending to be feared. The transformation of this nuanced Maya understanding into modern apocalyptic prophecy represents a profound misreading driven by contemporary anxieties rather than ancient beliefs. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, as the date of December 21, 2012 approached, Western popular culture seized upon the Maya calendar as validation from millennial fears that had been building since the approach of the year 2000. Books, documentary films, internet speculation, and eventually Hollywood disaster movies transformed the Maya Baktun completion into prophecy of global catastrophe, interpreting the calendar's cyclical reset as prediction of apocalyptic ending. This interpretation required ignoring or misunderstanding fundamental aspects of Maya cosmology, particularly their cyclical view of time and their acceptance of endings as transitions rather than terminations. Where the Maya saw the completion of one great cycle and the beginning of another, comparable to the transition from one year to the next, but occurring at a vastly larger temporal scale, modern apocalyptic interpretation imposed linear thinking that treated endings as absolute, that could not conceive of completion except as cessation, that projected contemporary fears about nuclear war, environmental collapse, and cosmic catastrophe backward onto an ancient calendar system designed to track cosmic cycles of creation and renewal. The date arrived as astronomical calculations guaranteed it would, and continued into the day following without supernatural catastrophe or cosmic disruption. The sun rose on December 22, 2012, exactly as Maya astronomers would have calculated it would millennia earlier, the celestial mechanics grinding forward with the same imperturbable precision they had maintained since the formation of the solar system billions of years before human consciousness emerged to observe and interpret their movements. The apocalypse failed to materialize because it had never been predicted, except in the fearful imaginations of a culture struggling to find meaning in an age that felt perpetually on the brink of self-destruction. Yet something profound did end in 2012, something the Maya perhaps anticipated in ways that our literal, materially focused culture could not recognize or appreciate. An age of consciousness concluded, a way of relating to time and existence that had prevailed throughout recorded history, reached a point of crisis and potential transformation. The industrial growth paradigm that had dominated human civilization for centuries confronted undeniable evidence of its unsustainability. Environmental damage accumulated beyond the planet's capacity to absorb. Social and economic systems strained under contradictions that could no longer be ignored or delayed. The old stories that had sustained collective meaning and purpose lost their power to inspire or guide, leaving populations unmoored, searching for new narratives that might make sense of existence in an age of unprecedented change and uncertainty. In this sense, though not in the manner that apocalyptic speculators anticipated, the Maya prophecy proved accurate. The completion of the 13th Baktun did mark a transition, the ending of one way of being and the beginning of something new, though the transformation occurred in consciousness and culture rather than in supernatural catastrophe or cosmic destruction. We entered at that calendrical station an age of uncertainty and potential, a time when old certainties dissolved and new possibilities emerged, when humanity faced the necessity of fundamental transformation in its relationship to itself, to other species, to the planetary systems that sustain life, to the cosmos within which our small world turns through endless night. The Maya understanding of time as cyclical, of endings as transformations, of catastrophe as necessary dissolution preceding rebirth, offers a framework for navigating this age of transition with greater equanimity than the apocalyptic thinking that dominated interpretation of their calendar. If we can learn to see as they saw, to recognize that what appears to be ending is also beginning, that destruction and creation are not opposites, but complementary aspects of a unified process of transformation, we might approach our contemporary crises with the wisdom that sustained Maya civilization through centuries of dramatic change and adaptation. This wisdom finds its deepest expression in the mythology preserved in the Popol Vuh, particularly in the story of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, whose journey through the underworld and ultimate triumph over the lords of death encodes profound truths about the nature of existence, consciousness, and cosmic order. Their story, told around fires in Maya communities for generations before being transcribed alphabetically by Quichua scribes after the Spanish conquest, reveals the Maya understanding of how life emerges from death, how consciousness navigates between light and darkness, how apparent defeat contains the seeds of ultimate victory. The hero twins were born under unusual circumstances, their father and uncle having been summoned to the underworld realm of Xibalaba by its jealous lords, who could not tolerate the sound of the rubber ball game being played on the earth's surface above their dark domain. These lords of death, whose names meant things like Pus Master, Jaundice Master, Bone Staff, Skull Staff, and other appellations of disease and decay, challenged the twins' father and uncle to play the ball game in Xibalaba, then through trickery and deception defeated and sacrificed them, hanging the severed head of one in a calabash tree as a trophy and warning. When a curious maiden approached this tree, the skull spoke to her and spat into her hand, impregnating her with the hero twins who would eventually avenge their father and uncle's death. The twins grew to maturity demonstrating unusual abilities and cleverness, and, like their father and uncle before them, they too were eventually summoned to Xibalaba to play the ball game against the lords of death. But unlike their predecessors, the hero twins possessed wisdom and cunning sufficient to navigate the trials and deceptions of the underworld without succumbing to destruction. The lords of Xibalba tested the twins with a series of ordeals, sending them into houses of different types of death and danger. They spent a night in the House of Darkness, where they were expected to burn up their pine torches for light, but instead used fireflies and the red tips of macaw tail feathers to create the illusion of flames while preserving their actual torches. They survived the House of Knives by convincing the blades to remain still in exchange for animal flesh. They endured the House of Cold, the House of Jaguars, and the House of Fire through similar combinations of cleverness and deception, refusing to play by the rules that would ensure their defeat. Finally, the lords of Xibalba attempted to burn the twins alive in a great oven, and this time, the twins accepted their apparent defeat, allowing themselves to be immolated and having their bones ground to powder and thrown into a river. But this death was not ending, but transformation. The ground bones dissolved in the water and reformed as fish. Then the fish emerged onto the banks and transformed into ragged wanderers who performed miraculous tricks, sacrificing and resurrecting animals, even sacrificing and resurrecting each other in demonstrations that amazed all who witnessed them. When the lords of Xibalba heard of these miraculous performers, they summoned them to perform at the royal court, not recognizing the wanderers as the hero twins they had believed destroyed. The twins performed their tricks, culminating in sacrificing and resurrecting each other to the astonishment and delight of the Death Lords. Then, in the performance's climax, the Lords of Death themselves demanded to be sacrificed and resurrected to experience this miraculous transformation. The hero twins obliged, sacrificing the Lords of Xibalba, but declined to resurrect them, thus defeating death itself through cunning rather than force. Having triumphed over the underworld, the hero twins ascended to the heavens where they became the sun and moon, their eternal presence in the sky serving as a reminder and guarantee that light will always return after darkness, that consciousness survives the descent into death and emerges transformed and triumphant. Their story encodes not merely entertainment, but profound spiritual truth about the nature of existence and the possibilities available to consciousness that learns to navigate between opposites rather than being trapped by them.
The ball game that initiated the hero twins' journey to Xibalba was itself laden with cosmic significance in Maya culture. The eye-shaped ball courts found at Maya sites throughout Mesoamerica served as architectural representations of the portal between earthly and underworld realms.
The game played in these courts reenacted cosmic struggles between opposing forces, light and darkness, life and death, order and chaos. The rubber ball represented the sun in its daily journey through the sky and its nightly passage through the underworld, while the players embodied the forces that competed for dominance in the eternal cosmic drama that sustained existence. This mythological framework reveals the Maya understanding that creation emerges from the tension between opposites, that existence depends upon the dynamic balance between destruction and generation, that neither pole of this duality can triumph absolutely without collapsing the entire structure of reality. The hero twins' victory over the lords of Xibalba did not eliminate death or darkness from existence, but rather established proper relationship between these forces and their opposites, ensuring that death and darkness served their necessary functions within cosmic order, without overwhelming the forces of life and light. The same dynamic balance characterizes the Maya understanding of world ages and their transitions. Each age that ended did so not because darkness had triumphed over light, but because existence had fallen out of proper balance, had tilted too far in one direction or another, requiring dissolution and reformation to restore equilibrium. The flood that destroyed the wooden people came not as arbitrary divine punishment, but as necessary correction, washing away a form of existence that had failed to maintain proper relationship with cosmic order, clearing space for a new attempt at creation that might succeed where previous versions had failed. Applied to the completion of the 13th Baktun, this mythological framework suggests that the Maya anticipated not destruction but rebalancing, not apocalypse but opportunity for transformation and renewal. Like the hero twins, who had to descend into Xibalba and accept apparent death before emerging triumphant and transformed, humanity at the transition between cosmic ages might expect to encounter challenges and difficulties that would test our wisdom and adaptability, that would require us to navigate between opposites, rather than clinging desperately to familiar but obsolete ways of being. The astronomical knowledge that undergirded Maya prophecy and timekeeping demonstrates their sophisticated understanding of cosmic mechanics and cyclical patterns, an understanding built patiently across generations of careful observation, mathematical calculation, and transmission of accumulated wisdom from teachers to students in the schools where young nobles learned the sacred sciences. Their observations of Venus, in particular, revealed their recognition that celestial phenomena repeated in predictable cycles that could be calculated and anticipated with remarkable precision.
The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Maya books to escape destruction by Spanish conquistadors and missionaries who feared the texts as works of paganism, contains astronomical tables that track Venus with extraordinary accuracy, noting its synodic period of 584 days, the interval between successive appearances in the same position relative to the Sun, and correlating this cycle with the sacred calendar to determine auspicious and inauspicious periods for various activities, particularly warfare and royal rituals. Venus held special significance in Maya astronomy not merely for its brightness, though it shines as the 3rd brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon, but because of its unusual behavior as both morning star and evening star, appearing to die when it disappeared from view during inferior conjunction as it passed between Earth and Sun, then being reborn as it emerged in a new position relative to the Sun after a period of invisibility. This death and resurrection pattern, observable by anyone who paid careful attention to the pre-dawn and post-sunset skies, resonated deeply with Maya mythology and cosmology, making Venus an ideal celestial representative of the transformation principle that governed all existence, the eternal cycle of endings and beginnings that structured their understanding of time and cosmic order. The Maya packed Venus not merely for calendrical purposes, but because its movements revealed cosmic patterns that had implications for human affairs, demonstrating through mathematical regularity the orderly nature of existence and the accessibility of divine knowledge to properly trained observers who dedicated themselves to patient watching and careful recording. The planet's appearances and disappearances marked periods of heightened spiritual power or danger, times when the barrier between earthly and celestial realms grew thin and permeable. Warfare was timed to Venus cycles, with attacks often launched when the planet made its first appearance as morning star after inferior conjunction, a moment understood as especially potent and dangerous, when the celestial forces that governed conflict and transformation were most active and available to rulers who knew how to align human actions with cosmic energies. The Maya ability to predict eclipses centuries in advance demonstrates their deep understanding of celestial mechanics and their commitment to maintaining accurate records across generations. Eclipse prediction required not only careful observation, but also mathematical sophistication to recognize the Saros cycle, the period of approximately 18 years after which eclipse patterns repeat with remarkable regularity. The Dresden Codex contains eclipse tables that allowed Maya astronomers to anticipate when the sun or moon would be devoured by celestial forces, knowledge that proved both scientifically valuable and politically powerful, as the ability to predict such dramatic celestial events reinforced the authority of the priestly class, who possessed this specialized knowledge. Eclipses held profound symbolic significance in Maya cosmology beyond their astronomical interest. When the sun darkened during a solar eclipse, it was understood as a manifestation of cosmic battle, a moment when the forces of darkness temporarily overwhelmed the light, demonstrating that chaos constantly threatened to disrupt cosmic order, and that only through vigilance and proper ritual could balance be maintained. The fact that the sun always emerged victorious from these encounters, that light always returned after the darkness, provided reassurance that cosmic order would prevail despite temporary disruptions, that the universe possessed inherent resilience that guaranteed its continuation through cycles of challenge and renewal. The Milky Way held equally profound significance in Maya astronomical and mythological thought. This luminous band stretching across the night sky, visible with stunning clarity from Maya cities where no artificial light obscured the heavens, was understood as the Waka Chan, the world tree, the cosmic axis that connected the three levels of existence: underworld, earthly plane, and celestial realm. The dark rift running through the Milky Way's central regions, created by interstellar dust clouds that obscure the light of more distant stars, was seen as the mouth of a cosmic serpent, or the entrance to the underworld through which souls traveled after death, and from which new life emerged in the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Some modern interpreters have suggested that the completion of the 13th Baktun on December 21, 2012, held special astronomical significance because of an alignment between the winter solstice sun and the dark rift in the Milky Way, an event these interpreters characterize as galactic alignment that supposedly occurs only once every 26,000 years. This interpretation has captured popular imagination, suggesting that the Maya prophecy concerned a rare astronomical configuration that would occur at precisely the moment of calendrical completion, lending cosmic significance to the date through celestial mechanics, rather than merely calendrical calculation. However, astronomical scholars have largely debunked this galactic alignment theory, pointing out that alignments of this nature are not precise singular events, but gradual processes occurring over many years, that the winter solstice sun has been crossing through the general region of the galactic center for decades, rather than achieving precise alignment at a single moment. Furthermore, no ancient Maya texts explicitly reference such an alignment or suggest that the Baktun completion had particular astronomical significance beyond its calendrical importance. The alignment theory appears to represent modern projection of astronomical interests backward onto Maya cosmology rather than authentic interpretation of ancient Maya astronomical knowledge and prophecy. Nevertheless, the persistence of this interpretation reveals something significant about contemporary needs and desires. The search for astronomical significance in the Maya calendar completion reflects a modern impulse to ground spiritual meaning in physical phenomena, to find validation for mystical experiences in scientific observation, to bridge the chasm that has opened in Western culture between material and spiritual understanding of reality. The Maya themselves experienced no such division, their astronomy and spirituality being unified aspects of a holistic worldview that saw mathematical patterns and divine significance as complementary rather than contradictory ways of comprehending existence. The Maya practice of marking significant calendar stations with astronomical observations served multiple functions simultaneously. It synchronized human ritual with cosmic phenomena, ensuring that ceremonies occurred at moments when celestial energies were most favorable for their intended purposes. It demonstrated the harmony between human timekeeping and cosmic mechanics, validating the accuracy of Maya calendrical systems through their successful prediction of astronomical events. It created opportunities for direct experience of cosmic order, moments when the mathematical elegance of celestial movements became visible and tangible, reinforcing through sensory experience the intellectual understanding that existence operated according to knowable patterns and principles. Certain buildings and Maya sites were designed specifically to capture and display these astronomical alignments. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid known as El Castillo creates a serpent shadow during the equinoxes, sunlight streaming past the pyramid's corners to illuminate undulating carved serpent bodies on the stairway balustrades, creating the appearance of a serpent descending from heaven to earth. At Uxmal, the governor's palace includes a doorway aligned with the southmost rising point of Venus, allowing the planet's light to stream directly through the opening at specific intervals in its complex cycle. These architectural achievements demonstrate the integration of astronomy, architecture, mathematics, and spirituality that characterized Maya civilization at its height. The zenith passages of the sun held particular significance for Maya communities located within the tropics. Twice each year, at dates that varied depending on latitude, the sun at solar noon would pass directly overhead, casting no shadow, marking moments when the celestial and terrestrial realms achieved perfect vertical alignment. These zero-shadow days were noted and celebrated, their occurrence validating the Maya understanding that they occupied a sacred geographical location where heaven and earth maintained a specially close relationship. The agricultural calendar synchronized with these astronomical events, planting and harvesting timed to celestial cycles that governed the arrival and departure of seasonal rains, essential for successful maize cultivation. This intimate integration of astronomy, agriculture, and spirituality created a civilization exquisitely attuned to natural cycles and cosmic rhythms, a culture that saw itself as participant in universal processes rather than observer or controller of nature. The Maya did not seek to conquer or dominate the natural world, but rather to understand its patterns and align human activities with cosmic order, maintaining through ritual and calendar observance the delicate balance that sustained existence. This ecological wisdom, encoded in astronomical knowledge and mythological narrative, represents one of their most valuable contributions to human understanding, offering contemporary civilization a model for sustainable relationship with natural systems that we have largely abandoned in our industrial age. Yet despite this sophisticated understanding and their remarkable achievements in astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and art, Maya civilization experienced its own catastrophic ending during what archaeologists term the classic Maya collapse. Between approximately 800 and 900 CE, many of the greatest Maya cities were abandoned, their populations dispersing or declining dramatically, their monumental construction projects ceasing abruptly,
their elaborate artistic traditions and hieroglyphic writing falling into disuse. The causes of this collapse have been debated extensively by scholars, with evidence pointing to a complex interaction of environmental degradation, prolonged drought, warfare, social unrest, and political fragmentation that combined to destabilize the intricate systems that had sustained classic Maya civilization for centuries. The collapse was not uniform or instantaneous, but occurred in waves across the Maya region, with some cities falling earlier while others maintained viability for decades or even centuries longer. The experience must have felt apocalyptic to those who lived through it, watching their great cities slowly empty, seeing the jungle reclaim plazas and pyramids that had been centers of power and culture, witnessing the dissolution of social orders that had seemed permanent and unassailable. For the Maya of the classic period, this was their end of the world. The collapse of everything familiar and reliable, the failure of systems that had sustained their ancestors for generations. Yet the Maya people themselves did not end. Populations shifted, adapted, reorganized themselves in new configurations. The post-classic period that followed the classic collapse saw the emergence of new centers of power, new artistic styles, new forms of social and political organization that built upon surviving elements of classic culture while adapting to changed circumstances. The Maya language, culture, and spiritual traditions persisted through this transformation, demonstrating the resilience of human communities and the capacity of cultures to survive even catastrophic disruptions to their familiar forms. This historical experience of collapse and survival, of endings that were simultaneously transformations, provides crucial context for understanding Maya prophecies about world ages and calendar completions. The Maya had lived through their own apocalypse and emerged on the other side, had watched their civilization fall, and then rebuilt new versions of it from surviving elements. They knew from direct historical experience that endings were not final, that catastrophic change did not mean extinction, that human communities possessed remarkable capacity to adapt and continue even when familiar structures dissolved around them. The prophecies preserved in hieroglyphic texts and oral traditions reflected this experiential wisdom. When Maya sources spoke of world ages ending and beginning, they described a pattern the Maya had actually experienced in their own history. When they predicted transformation at significant calendar stations, they anticipated challenges and changes comparable to those their ancestors had navigated successfully. The prophecy concerning the completion of the 13th Baktun thus carried weight, not because the Maya imagined supernatural catastrophe, but because their history taught them that significant transitions demanded adaptation and transformation, that old orders periodically gave way to new ones, that survival required willingness to release familiar patterns and embrace necessary changes. The environmental factors that contributed to the classic collapse hold particular relevance for contemporary civilization facing its own environmental crisis, creating an almost eerie mirror between ancient and modern circumstances that makes the Maya experience both warning and potential guide for navigation of our own threshold moment. Evidence from lake sediment cores drilled from the floors of Yucatan lakes, from cave deposits called speleothems that record rainfall patterns in their chemical signatures, from archaeological excavations that reveal changes in settlement patterns and agricultural practices, and from climate reconstructions based on multiple independent proxies, all converge to indicate that the Maya heartland experienced severe drought conditions during the period of collapse. Rainfall declined dramatically below levels necessary to sustain the agricultural production that supported dense urban populations, with studies suggesting precipitation decreased by 41 to 54% on average, with peak drought conditions seeing rainfall reduction of up to 70% compared to modern levels, transforming a seasonal tropical environment into something approaching desert conditions for extended periods. This drought was not brief or anomalous, but represented a shift in regional climate patterns that persisted for decades, perhaps even centuries, when considering the multiple drought pulses that struck during the terminal classic period, between approximately 800 and 1,000 years after the conventional era began. The severest droughts of the terminal classic, as reconstructed from lake sediments and cave deposits, represent the driest conditions experienced in the Maya region during the preceding 7,000 years. An almost incomprehensible span of time that encompasses the entirety of Maya civilization, from its earliest beginnings through its classic florescence. The drought exhausted stored water reserves that communities had accumulated in reservoirs and aguadas, the natural and artificial water storage systems that sustained cities through the annual dry season. It reduced the productivity of rain-fed agriculture that provided the surplus supporting urban populations, specialized craftspeople, elaborate ritual systems, ambitious construction projects, and the complex hierarchical social structures that characterize classic Maya civilization at its height. But the drought alone cannot explain the collapse, as the Maya had successfully navigated earlier dry periods without experiencing civilization-wide catastrophe, demonstrating their capacity for adaptation and their resilience in the face of environmental challenges. The terminal classic drought proved so devastating precisely because it occurred in the context of environmental degradation that had reduced the landscape's resilience and carrying capacity, making the entire system vulnerable to perturbations that might otherwise have been absorbed and survived.
Deforestation undertaken to provide timber for construction, to clear land for expanded agriculture, and to produce the vast quantities of fuel needed for line production that created the brilliant white plaster covering temples and monuments, had altered local hydrology in ways that reduced the landscape's capacity to retain water during rainy seasons and release it gradually during dry periods. Population growth throughout the Classic period had pushed settlement into increasingly marginal lands, onto hillsides and into areas with thin soils or unreliable water sources, creating vulnerability to any disruption in agricultural production. By the late Classic period, some Maya centers supported population densities rivaling or exceeding modern Los Angeles County, an almost unimaginable achievement for a civilization relying entirely on human labor, lacking draft animals, wheeled transport, or metal tools, sustained by agriculture based primarily on maize cultivation, supplemented by beans, squash, and other crops. Such dense populations required consistent agricultural surplus to maintain urban life, specialized occupations, monumental construction, long-distance trade networks, and the elaborate ritual and political systems that bound communities together and legitimized hierarchical authority structures. The social and political structures of classic Maya civilization, with its emphasis on competition between rival cities, elaborate ritual life that consumed substantial resources, and hierarchical organization that concentrated wealth and power in elite hands, created additional vulnerabilities. When environmental stress reduced agricultural surplus, the complex systems dependent on that surplus became unstable. Warfare intensified as competing polities fought over diminishing resources. Ritual failures, as predicted rains failed to arrive despite proper ceremonies, undermined the authority of rulers, whose legitimacy depended partly on their claimed ability to mediate between human and divine realms. Social unrest increased as populations facing food shortages questioned political arrangements that preserved elite privilege, while commoners suffered. The parallels to contemporary circumstances are striking and sobering. Modern civilization likewise confronts environmental degradation of our own making, climate change driven by industrial activity, resource depletion, ecological damage that reduces planetary resilience. Our complex social and economic systems demonstrate similar vulnerabilities, dependent on growth and surplus that environmental limits increasingly constrain. Political structures show signs of instability as populations lose faith in institutions that seem unable to address mounting challenges. The Maya experience suggests that civilization-scale transformation becomes inevitable when environmental, social, and political stresses converge and exceed systemic capacity to absorb and adapt to change. Yet the Maya experience also demonstrates that transformation need not mean extinction, that human communities possess remarkable resilience and adaptability when willing to release attachment to familiar forms and embrace necessary changes. The Maya who survived the classic collapse did not preserve their civilization in amber, but allowed it to transform, emerging from crisis with new social arrangements, new settlement patterns, new cultural expressions that maintained connection to their heritage while adapting to altered circumstances. This capacity for transformation through catastrophe represents the positive message encoded in Maya prophecy about world ages and their transitions. The contemporary relevance of Maya calendar prophecy lies not in supernatural predictions or astronomical alignments, but in this deeper wisdom about cycles and transformation. The completion of the 13th Baktun marked, in Maya understanding, a significant calendarical station, a moment when one great cycle concluded and another began, a threshold that demanded attention and appropriate observance. Whether or not they anticipated specific events at that moment matters less than their recognition that existence moved in cycles, that ages concluded and renewed, that transformation represented not catastrophe to be feared, but natural process to be navigated with awareness and skill. The fundamental insight underlying Maya prophecy concerns the cyclical nature of time and existence, the recognition that patterns repeat at various scales, that what appears to be linear progression actually spirals through recurring themes and challenges. This cyclical understanding contrasts sharply with the linear time consciousness that has dominated Western civilization, the progress narrative that imagines history as steady advancement toward ever greater heights of achievement and understanding. Linear time consciousness creates psychological difficulties when facing endings, as it cannot conceive of completion except as termination, cannot imagine transformation except as loss. The agricultural cycle provided the primary template for Maya understanding of time's cyclical nature. Each year followed the same essential pattern: planting season arriving with the rains, crops growing through summer, harvest occurring as the dry season approached, a fallow period of rest and preparation before the cycle renewed. Yet no 2 years proved identical, each rotation bringing variations in rainfall timing and abundance, in pest pressures and crop success, in the specific challenges that required adaptation and response. The cycle repeated but never duplicated, each turn of the wheel bringing both familiar patterns and unique circumstances. This agricultural template extended to larger cycles, with longer periods of abundance and scarcity, wetter and drier climatic phases, times when populations expanded, and times when they contracted. The Maya recognized that these larger cycles nested within each other, creating complex temporal landscapes where multiple rhythms interacted, where the character of any particular moment reflected the combined influences of many cycles operating simultaneously at different scales. A day's quality depended not only on its position in the sacred calendar, but also on the current phase of Venus cycle, the ongoing Katun period, the season of the solar year, and numerous other factors that required sophisticated calculation to properly understand and anticipate. The concept of Katun prophecy illustrates this cyclical approach to understanding time and predicting future conditions. Each Katun period of approximately 20 years possessed its own character and typical patterns, based partly on astronomical configurations, but also on historical observation of what had occurred during previous Katun periods with the same calendar name. Maya books of prophecy describe the character of each Katun, the types of events likely to occur, the challenges and opportunities that that particular time period would bring, the appropriate responses and precautions that communities should undertake to navigate that Katun's specific conditions successfully. These prophecies were not deterministic predictions of specific events, but rather descriptions of tendencies and probabilities, comparable to weather forecasting that describes likely conditions without claiming certainty about exact outcomes. A Katun characterized by drought tendency did not mean every moment of those 20 years would be dry, but rather that overall conditions would tend toward water scarcity, requiring preparation and adaptation. A Katun marked by warfare did not guarantee constant battle, but suggested that conflicts were more likely to arise, and that communities should prepare defenses and diplomatic strategies appropriate to such times. This probabilistic approach to prophecy reflected sophisticated understanding of how patterns emerge from complex systems where many factors interact. The Maya did not imagine fate as fixed and inevitable, but rather saw the future as field of possibilities whose actualization depended on both cosmic conditions and human responses. Proper prophecy identified tendencies and provided guidance for navigating probable conditions, empowering communities to prepare and adapt rather than passively accepting predetermined outcomes. This practical orientation distinguished Maya prophecy from fatalistic predictions of inevitable doom,
emphasizing human agency and responsibility within the context of larger patterns beyond individual control. The daily cycle of sunrise and sunset, the sun's journey across the sky and its nightly passage through the underworld before emerging triumphant at dawn, provided another fundamental template for cyclical understanding. The hero twins' transformation into sun and moon after their victory over the lords of Xibalba encoded this daily pattern into mythology, guaranteeing through divine precedent that light would always return after darkness, that consciousness would survive its descent into unknowing and emerge renewed. Each dawn reenacted this cosmic victory. Each sunset initiated the perilous journey through realms of death and dissolution that preceded rebirth. Human life followed this same pattern of descent and renewal. Birth emerged from the darkness of the womb, consciousness gradually awakening in infant minds like sunrise illuminating the world. Life proceeded through stages comparable to the sun's daily arc, reaching zeniths of power and capability before declining toward the horizon of old age and death. But death was not ending, but transition, the soul descending into the underworld much as the sun descended nightly, journeying through trials and transformations before emerging renewed, possibly to be reborn into new life or to take its place among the ancestors whose presence continued to influence the world of the living. This view of death as transformation rather than termination provided comfort and reduced existential anxiety that plagues cultures with more linear time consciousness and absolute views of mortality. The Maya did not deny the reality or seriousness of death, but understood it as a phase in larger cycles of existence. Difficult and dangerous, certainly, requiring proper ritual and preparation, but ultimately survivable, leading to continuation in altered form rather than absolute cessation. The elaborate burial practices and ancestor veneration that characterized Maya culture reflected this understanding, maintaining connection with deceased relatives whose spirits remained engaged with their descendants and communities. Seasonal cycles demonstrated transformation at a scale larger than daily but shorter than lifetime, showing how apparent death gave way to renewal in predictable patterns. The dry season brought dormancy, plants losing their leaves, animals becoming scarce, water sources diminishing, the landscape taking on brown and dusty appearance that might seem like death to observers unfamiliar with tropical ecology. Yet this apparent death was merely rest, life persisting in dormant forms, seeds waiting, roots storing energy, creatures sheltering until conditions improved. When the rains returned, the landscape exploded into green abundance seemingly overnight, demonstrating that what appeared dead had merely been sleeping, that life possessed resilience and capacity for renewal beyond surface appearances. The Mayan plant embodied this transformation mystery particularly powerfully. The seed placed in earth apparently died, its outer shell rotting in soil moisture. Yet from this dissolution emerged the sprout that would grow into the plant that would produce new seeds in abundance. The Maya maize god mythology encoded this agricultural cycle, telling of the god's death and burial, his descent into the underworld, and his resurrection as new growth emerging from earth. The maize cycle thus provided tangible, annually repeated demonstration of the principle that death and life were not opposites but stages in continuous transformation, that endings necessarily preceded beginnings, that dissolution was required before renewal could occur. Applied to world ages and cosmic cycles, this understanding suggested that the ending of one age and beginning of another followed the same pattern visible in agricultural cycles, daily cycles, human lifespans, and all other manifestations of temporal existence. Just as the seed must be buried before the plant can grow, just as the sun must descend through the underworld before dawn can arrive, just as summer abundance must give way to winter rest before spring renewal, so too must world ages conclude before new ages can begin. The catastrophes that ended previous ages were not punishments or failures, but necessary transformations, cosmic composting that broke down obsolete forms and released their energies to fuel new creation. This agricultural metaphor for cosmic transformation offers profound comfort and guidance for civilizations facing their own periods of crisis and change.
It suggests that dissolution and reconstruction are natural processes rather than catastrophic failures, that what appears to be collapse may actually be necessary decomposition preceding new growth, that holding on to forms that have exhausted their vitality prevents the emergence of new possibilities. The Maya prophecy about the completion of the 13th Bakhtan, understood in this context, represented not prediction of apocalypse, but recognition that a major cycle was completing and that appropriate response involved releasing attachment to the dying age while preparing to receive and nurture the seeds of whatever would emerge next. The wisdom traditions that emerged from this cyclical understanding emphasized balance, sustainability, and harmony with natural rhythms rather than conquest, extraction, and domination of nature. Maya agricultural practices, though not without environmental impact, generally worked within ecological limits, using techniques like forest gardens and crop rotation that maintained soil fertility and landscape resilience. Their built environment, though imposing and grand, integrated with rather than obliterated natural topography and ecosystems. Their social structures, though hierarchical and not free from injustice, maintained connections between elite and common people through shared ritual participation and mutual obligations that prevented the extreme wealth concentration that characterizes contemporary civilization. These practices reflected a worldview that saw humanity as embedded within natural systems rather than separate from or superior to them, that understood human flourishing as dependent upon maintaining healthy relationships with the more than human world of plants, animals, weather patterns, and cosmic forces. The ceremonies and offerings that filled Maya ritual life were not merely superstitious practices, but expressions of reciprocity, ways of acknowledging that human communities received gifts from the world and owed gratitude and care in return. The attention to astronomical cycles and seasonal patterns that structured Maya timekeeping reflected acknowledgement that human activities should synchronize with larger rhythms, rather than proceeding according to purely human-determined schedules. This embedded reciprocal relationship with the cosmos meant that prophecy served practical as well as spiritual functions. Knowing the character of different time periods allowed for appropriate planning and preparation. Understanding that certain activities were more likely to succeed during particular calendar stations enabled strategic timing of important undertakings. Recognizing that cycles of abundance and scarcity would inevitably occur encouraged the development of storage systems and social structures that could buffer temporary shortfalls. Prophecy thus represented not fatalistic resignation, but sophisticated risk management, using pattern recognition to anticipate probable challenges and opportunities. The contemporary dismissal of prophecy as primitive superstition reflects modern culture's discomfort with uncertainty and our preference for illusions of control and prediction based on mechanistic models that treat the universe as machine rather than living organism. The Maya recognized that existence involved irreducible uncertainty, that the future could not be known with absolute certainty, that the best available approach involved identifying patterns and tendencies while remaining adaptable to unexpected developments. This humble acknowledgement of the limits of prediction actually enabled more realistic and effective planning than approaches that assume comprehensive knowledge and control. The prophecy concerning the completion of the 13th Baktun thus represented not supernatural revelation, but extrapolation from observed patterns combined with mythological and spiritual understanding of how cosmic cycles operated. The Maya expected this calendrical completion to mark a significant threshold because it represented the conclusion of a grand cycle encompassing multiple human generations, a temporal scale at which major patterns completed and renewed. They anticipated that this transition might bring challenges and opportunities comparable to those that occurred at other significant calendar stations, that it would demand attention and appropriate ceremonial observance, that communities should prepare for possible disruptions while remaining open to new possibilities that might emerge. Whether specific events would occur at the moment of transition mattered less than maintaining proper relationship with the cosmic forces represented by the calendar, demonstrating through ceremony and awareness that human communities remained conscious participants in universal processes rather than disconnected observers.
The emphasis fell upon human responsibility and response rather than passive waiting for predetermined outcomes, reflecting the Maya understanding that while cosmic patterns constrained possibilities, human choices and actions determined actual outcomes within those constraints. This balanced view between cosmic determinism and human agency offers valuable perspective for contemporary civilizations struggling with questions about our capacity to influence our collective future in an age of environmental crisis and social transformation. Like the Maya facing the completion of a major calendar cycle, we confront circumstances that combine elements beyond our control with opportunities for meaningful choice and action. We cannot reverse centuries of environmental damage instantly or eliminate the momentum of changes already set in motion, yet neither are we helpless observers of inevitable catastrophe. Our choices regarding how we respond to current challenges will significantly influence whether the transformation we are experiencing leads toward renewal or toward deeper crisis. The Maya prophecy, properly understood, does not absolve us of responsibility through fatalistic prediction of predetermined outcomes, but rather calls us to awareness of the patterns within which we operate and to conscious participation in the transformation occurring around and within us. It suggests that we are living through a completion and transition comparable to the end of their 13th Baktun, not because of arbitrary calendrical coincidence, but because human civilization has reached limits of growth patterns that cannot continue indefinitely, because we face necessity of fundamental transformation in our relationship with each other and with the planetary systems that sustain life. The age that is ending, if we accept this interpretation, is the age of extraction and exploitation, the belief that resources are infinite and that human cleverness can transcend natural limits, the story that technological progress will solve all problems and that material abundance represents the highest good. This story sustained remarkable achievements in certain domains, while creating mounting crises in others, improving the lives of some humans dramatically while devastating ecosystems and leaving billions in poverty, producing comforts and capabilities previous generations could not imagine while generating threats to the biosphere's capacity to support complex life. The signs of this age's exhaustion surround us. Climate change accelerates beyond predictions, driven by atmospheric alterations that will persist for centuries, regardless of current actions. Biodiversity declines at rates comparable to mass extinction events in the geological record. Ocean acidification threatens marine food webs that feed billions of people. Soil degradation reduces agricultural productivity precisely when growing populations demand increased food production. Freshwater depletion creates conflicts and suffering in regions worldwide. Pollution saturates environments with substances that disrupt biological processes in ways we are only beginning to understand. Yet simultaneously, new possibilities emerge. New stories begin to circulate. New technologies and social arrangements demonstrate alternative approaches. Renewable energy systems demonstrate feasibility of powering civilization without fossil fuels. Regenerative agriculture shows that food production can restore rather than degrade landscapes. Circular economy concepts challenge the linear take, make, dispose model that treats the biosphere as infinite source and sink. Social movements demand justice and equity rather than accepting exploitation as inevitable. Millions of individuals modify their lives to reduce environmental impact and increase community connection. The seeds of a new age are visible, though whether they will germinate and flourish or be overwhelmed by the continuing momentum of the dying age remains uncertain. This uncertainty, this sense of standing at a threshold where multiple futures remain possible, depending on choices not yet made, resonates deeply with the Maya understanding of calendar completions and transitions. The completion of the 13th Baktun did not determine specific outcomes, but rather marked a moment of heightened potential, a crack in the continuity of ordinary existence through which transformation might enter. Similarly, our contemporary crisis represents not predetermined apocalypse, but threshold of possibility,
a moment when familiar structures are losing their stability and new patterns have opportunity to establish themselves if we can release our grip on the dying age and embrace the difficult work of birthing whatever comes next. The contemporary Maya people, descendants of the civilization that created the long count calendar and the prophecies surrounding it, numbering in the millions across Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and southern Mexico, speaking more than 30 distinct Maya languages and maintaining cultural traditions that connect them to their ancient heritage, despite centuries of colonization, oppression, and pressure toward assimilation, offer interesting and often quite different perspectives on the 2012 phenomenon and its aftermath than those that dominated Western discourse. Many Maya communities were genuinely bemused by the global fascination with their ancestors' calendar, finding strange and somewhat incomprehensible the apocalyptic interpretations that dominated Western media, books, films, and internet speculation. Maya elders and spiritual leaders, the daykeepers who maintain the traditional calendar systems and conduct ceremonies according to ancient patterns, repeatedly clarified that the completion of the Baktun represented cause for celebration rather than fear, an opportunity to honor the wisdom of ancestors who had created and maintained sophisticated systems of timekeeping across millennia, and to renew commitment to maintaining balance between humanity and the cosmos, between human communities and the natural world that sustains all life. Some contemporary Maya spiritual practitioners, drawing on oral traditions transmitted through families and communities, alongside interpretations that emerged through their own meditation and ceremonial work, described the transition as marking the end of the age of the fifth sun and the beginning of the sixth sun, using terminology that connected to the world age mythology preserved in the Popol Vuh and in colonial-era documents while adapting it to present circumstances and contemporary understanding. In this interpretation, offered by teachers and spiritual guides working within living Maya traditions rather than academic scholarship, the previous age that concluded in 2012 was characterized by separation, by hierarchies that divided people from each other and humanity from nature, by exploitation and extraction that exhausted resources and degraded relationships, by a forgetting of the fundamental interconnectedness that binds all beings within the web of existence. The emerging age, the sixth sun, according to this framework, would be characterized by reunion and reconnection, by recognition of fundamental interdependence that scientific ecology now confirms, but that indigenous wisdom traditions have always known, by healing of divisions that had fragmented human communities and severed our conscious connection to the natural world and cosmic order. This age of reunion, they proposed, would bring opportunities for humanity to remember its proper place within creation, to reestablish relationships of reciprocity with the more than human world, to rediscover ways of living that sustain rather than deplete, that nourish rather than extract, that recognize the sacred nature of existence rather than treating the world as mere resource to be exploited for short-term human benefit. This vision of the sixth sun emerging from the completion of the fifth sun resonates powerfully with contemporary movements toward ecological awareness, social justice, indigenous rights, and spiritual renewal that seek to heal the fragmentations created by industrial modernity and centuries of colonization, exploitation, and the systematic devaluation of indigenous knowledge systems. It suggests that the transformation predicted by the Maya calendar concerns consciousness and culture rather than a physical catastrophe, that the shift involves changing how we understand ourselves and our relationship to existence rather than expecting supernatural intervention to solve problems of our own making or waiting passively for external forces to determine humanity's future. Contemporary Maya communities continue to maintain traditional agricultural practices in many areas, particularly in the highlands of Guatemala and in more remote regions where modernization has proceeded more slowly and where indigenous knowledge systems retain vitality and practical application. These communities use techniques developed over millennia to cultivate maize and other crops in ways that work with, rather than against, ecological processes, that build soil rather than depleting it, that enhance rather than diminish biodiversity, that create sustainable yields across generations rather than maximizing short-term production at the cost of long-term fertility. These farming systems, when properly maintained and transmitted from elders to youth
through hands-on apprenticeship and embedded cultural knowledge, demonstrate remarkable resilience and productivity, supporting communities without the chemical inputs, fossil fuel dependency, and mechanization that characterize industrial agriculture, while creating landscapes that sustain both human populations and the diverse array of plant and animal species that share the territory. The knowledge embedded in these practices represents living connection to ancestral wisdom, direct transmission of understanding about how to maintain sustainable relationship with land and climate that sustained Maya civilization through centuries of varying conditions, through periods of abundance and scarcity, through climatic shifts and environmental changes. The milpa system, for instance, in which maize, beans, and squash are cultivated together in mutually supporting relationships, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of complementary planting, nitrogen fixation, soil conservation, and polyculture approaches that modern agricultural science is only beginning to fully appreciate and validate through controlled studies. The beans fix atmospheric nitrogen in the soil, enriching it for the maize. The maize stalks provide support structures for climbing bean vines. The squash leaves spread across the ground, shading soil, retaining moisture, and suppressing weeds that might compete with the cultivated crops. Together, the three sisters, as they are sometimes called, create a self-supporting agricultural ecosystem more productive, more resilient, and more sustainable than monoculture approaches that dominate industrial farming.
Yet these traditional practices face increasing pressure from modern economic forces that devalue subsistence agriculture and encourage transition to cash crops and wage labor, from development policies that promote industrial farming methods poorly suited to tropical environments and indigenous landholding patterns, from loss of land through various forms of legal and illegal expropriation, from climate change that alters rainfall patterns and temperature regimes in ways that disrupt agricultural calendars refined over generations of observation and adaptation. Young people migrate to cities seeking opportunities unavailable in rural communities, educational pathways that honor traditional knowledge while preparing youth for contemporary challenges remain inadequate, and the transmission of agricultural wisdom from elders to the next generation faces interruption as fewer young people remain in farming communities to learn the intricate seasonal knowledge, the plant varieties, the ceremonial practices, and the deep relationship with land that characterize traditional Maya agriculture. Land degradation from unsustainable practices imported from outside, from attempts to apply industrial agricultural models to environments where they function poorly, from population pressure on diminishing available land, from deforestation driven by cattle ranching, palm oil plantations, and timber extraction, all erode the viability of traditional farming and push communities toward migration, wage labor, and increasing dependence on market economies rather than subsistence production. Climate change, driven primarily by industrial emissions from wealthy nations far from Maya territories, alters rainfall patterns that Maya farmers have relied upon for millennia, shifts temperature regimes that determine successful crop cultivation, increases frequency of extreme weather events that damage crops and infrastructure, and introduces new pests and diseases that threaten traditional crop varieties and farming practices. The survival of traditional Maya culture and knowledge faces challenges comparable in some ways to those that confronted their classic period ancestors, requiring adaptation and transformation while maintaining connection to essential wisdom and practices. The persistence of Maya language and culture through more than 5 centuries of colonialism, exploitation, and cultural suppression demonstrates extraordinary resilience and commitment to maintaining identity and tradition despite overwhelming pressures toward assimilation. This survival itself offers lessons about how human communities navigate catastrophic change and emerge with core values and practices intact, even when external forms must transform. The Maya experience of the Spanish conquest represents another apocalypse survived, another end of the world that did not result in complete extinction, another demonstration that catastrophe and continuation are not mutually exclusive. The contemporary relevance of Maya prophecy and wisdom extends far beyond the specific calendar date that captured global attention. The fundamental insights underlying Maya cosmology,
The recognition of cyclical time, the acceptance of endings as transitions, the understanding of human embeddedness within natural and cosmic systems, the emphasis on balance and reciprocity, the sophisticated integration of observation and spirituality offer frameworks for understanding our current situation that are arguably more useful than the linear progress narratives and mechanistic worldviews that dominate contemporary culture. The Maya understood that sustainability requires aligning human activities with natural cycles rather than attempting to transcend or control them. Their agricultural practices worked within seasonal rhythms and ecological limits, taking from the land in ways that allowed for regeneration. Their ritual calendars synchronized human activities with celestial patterns, maintaining conscious awareness of humanity's place within larger cosmic processes. Their social structures, though imperfect, emphasized reciprocity and mutual obligation, recognizing that communities function best when relationships are balanced and when powerful members accept responsibility for supporting those with less power. These principles, applied to contemporary circumstances, suggest directions for transformation that might allow human civilization to navigate its current crisis toward outcomes that are sustainable and just, rather than catastrophic. Aligning economic systems with ecological limits, rather than demanding infinite growth on a finite planet. Synchronizing human activities with natural regeneration rates, rather than extracting resources faster than they can renew. Restructuring social arrangements to emphasize reciprocity and mutual care, rather than competition and accumulation. Recognizing our fundamental dependence on healthy ecosystems and cosmic stability, rather than imagining ourselves as separate from or superior to nature. The environmental wisdom encoded in Maya practices and beliefs becomes increasingly relevant as contemporary civilization confronts the consequences of having ignored ecological limits. The classic Maya collapse, driven partly by environmental degradation and climate change, demonstrates what occurs when civilization exceeds carrying capacity and when complex systems lose resilience through accumulation of stresses. Yet the Maya's survival through and after that collapse demonstrates that catastrophic transformation need not mean extinction, that human communities possess remarkable capacity to adapt and continue even when familiar structures fail. This dual message of warning and hope characterizes authentic Maya prophecy once we strip away the apocalyptic misinterpretations. The warning concerns what happens when balance is lost, when extraction exceeds regeneration, when social complexity becomes brittle rather than resilient, when environmental limits are ignored or denied. The hope concerns human capacity for transformation and adaptation, our ability to learn from crises, to release attachment to obsolete patterns, to create new forms of organization and relationship that better serve life and sustainability. The astronomical knowledge that underlay Maya timekeeping and prophecy demonstrated their commitment to careful observation and mathematical precision, to building understanding through patient accumulation of data across generations. The Dresden Codex and other surviving Maya books reveal the sophistication of their astronomical observations and the complexity of calculations they performed to maintain calendar systems that tracked multiple overlapping cycles simultaneously. This commitment to observation and calculation, to grounding spiritual understanding in verifiable phenomena, offers a model for integrating scientific and spiritual approaches to understanding existence. Contemporary civilization has tended to divorce these domains, treating science and spirituality as incompatible or opposing ways of knowing. The Maya experienced no such division, their astronomy serving simultaneously as practical tool for timekeeping and agriculture, and as revelation of divine order and cosmic patterns. Their mathematics enabled both mundane accounting and sacred calculation of calendar stations and prophecies. Their careful observation of natural phenomena informed both subsistence practices and spiritual understanding of how existence operated. This integration of practical and spiritual knowledge, of observation and meaning-making,
suggests possibilities for healing the fragmentation that characterizes modern consciousness. We need not choose between scientific understanding of climate change and spiritual recognition of sacred relationship with Earth. We need not separate practical concerns about sustainability from deeper questions about meaning and purpose. The Maya example demonstrates that careful observation of patterns strengthens rather than weakens spiritual understanding, that mathematical precision enhances rather than diminishes appreciation for cosmic beauty and order. The prophecy concerning the completion of the 13th Baktun, when understood in this integrated way, represents not superstitious prediction disconnected from reality, but rather sophisticated pattern recognition combined with spiritual insight about the significance of major transitions. The Maya noted that calendrical completions at various scales tended to correlate with significant events and transitions. They understood that human consciousness was influenced by temporal patterns, that the character of different time periods affected human behavior and historical outcomes. They recognized that moments of completion and transition carried heightened potential for transformation. These observations led them to anticipate that the completion of a grand cycle spanning more than 5,000 years would likely mark a significant transition, a moment deserving attention and appropriate observance. Whether they imagined specific events or simply expected general transformation remains uncertain given the fragmentary nature of surviving texts. What seems clear is that they did not predict apocalyptic destruction, but rather anticipated completion and renewal, the end of one great cycle and the beginning of another, a threshold requiring awareness and ceremonial acknowledgement to ensure successful navigation. The fact that no supernatural catastrophe occurred on December 21, 2012, does not invalidate Maya prophecy, but rather confirms its actual nature as recognition of cyclical patterns rather than prediction of specific events. The transition the Maya anticipated is occurring, though not in the form imagined by apocalyptic interpreters. We are living through the completion of one age and the difficult birth of another, navigating transformations in consciousness, culture, technology, social organization, and relationship with the natural world that are as profound as any supernatural catastrophe might have been. The environmental crisis alone represents world-changing transformation, requiring adaptations comparable to those demanded by the catastrophes that ended previous Maya world ages. Rising sea levels will redraw coastlines and displace hundreds of millions of people. Shifting climate zones will make some regions uninhabitable, while opening others to settlement. Changes in rainfall patterns will transform agriculture and force population movements. The extinction of species and degradation of ecosystems will alter the biological context within which human civilization exists. These changes are not supernatural, but they are profound, demanding transformation in how we organize our societies, power our economies, feed ourselves, and understand our place in the world. The social transformations occurring simultaneously with environmental changes likewise represent fundamental shifts comparable to movement between world ages. Traditional structures of authority and social organization face challenges from populations demanding greater voice and equity. Economic systems that concentrated wealth and power face mounting questions about sustainability and justice. Technologies that seemed purely beneficial reveal unintended consequences, requiring adaptation and regulation. Cultural assumptions about progress and development that sustained previous generations lose their power to inspire or guide. New forms of community and connection emerge, while older forms dissolve. This combination of environmental and social transformation creates circumstances that genuinely deserve the label of ending and beginning, of completion of one age and emergence of another. The Maya prophecy, interpreted not as prediction of supernatural catastrophe, but as recognition that major calendar completions correlate with significant transitions, proves remarkably applicable to our contemporary situation. We are experiencing what the completion of a world age feels like from inside, living through the uncertainty and disruption that characterize threshold periods when one pattern is dying and another struggling to be born. The hero twins' journey through Xibalba offers a mythological template for navigating such transitions with wisdom and courage. Like the twins, we face trials and challenges that test our cleverness and adaptability. Like them, we must be willing to descend into difficulty and uncertainty, to accept apparent defeats and dissolutions, trusting that transformation through crisis can lead to emergence at higher levels of consciousness and capability. Like them, we must use intelligence rather than force to navigate between opposites, finding third ways that transcend binary choices between preservation and destruction, between clinging to the past and abandoning all tradition. The twins' ultimate transformation into sun and moon demonstrates that successful navigation of underworld trials leads not to return to previous conditions, but to ascension to new levels of existence, to taking one's place in ongoing cosmic processes at higher scales of organization and influence. This mythological pattern suggests that the transformation we are experiencing, if navigated with wisdom and skill, might lead to expanded consciousness and enhanced capability, rather than merely degraded versions of familiar patterns. The crisis contains potential for genuine breakthrough, for evolutionary leap in how we understand ourselves and our relationship to existence. Yet the twins' success required them to remain clever and adaptive, to learn from mistakes, to work together rather than separately, to maintain courage and commitment even when circumstances seemed hopeless. These qualities remain essential for contemporary humanity facing our own journey through crisis and transformation. We must be clever, using intelligence to solve problems and navigate difficulties that cannot be overcome through force or denial. We must be adaptive, releasing attachment to familiar patterns when they no longer serve, and embracing necessary changes even when uncomfortable. We must work together, recognizing that individual or tribal survival at others' expense ultimately fails because we are all embedded in shared systems. We must maintain courage and commitment, persisting through setbacks and continuing to work toward positive outcomes even when success seems uncertain. The Maya understanding that multiple cycles operate simultaneously at different scales offers useful framework for comprehending the complexity of our current situation. The daily cycle of sunlight and darkness continues regardless of human crisis, offering reassurance that basic patterns persist even during times of dramatic change. The seasonal cycle of growth and dormancy provides templates for understanding how apparent endings give way to renewal. The longer cycles of climate variation and social transformation operate at scales that transcend individual human experience, but that nonetheless shape the conditions within which we live. Recognizing that we are embedded within these multiple overlapping cycles can reduce anxiety by contextualizing current challenges within larger patterns. The difficulties we face are not arbitrary or meaningless, but represent phases and natural cycles of transformation that have occurred throughout history and that will continue to occur as long as existence persists. This recognition does not make challenges easier, but it can provide comfort and orientation, helping us understand that we are not uniquely cursed or especially targeted, but rather experiencing what all humans in all times have experienced when living through major transitions. The agricultural metaphor that underlies much Maya cyclical thinking proves especially useful for contemporary circumstance. The fallow period, when fields rest, appears unproductive from narrow perspective focused only on immediate harvest, yet it proves essential for long-term fertility and sustainable production. Similarly, the dissolution of obsolete structures that we are experiencing, though disruptive and often painful, may prove necessary for emergence of new forms more suited to changed conditions and capable of supporting life sustainably into future generations. The seed that must be buried and apparently die before new growth can emerge offers powerful image for transformation through dissolution. What we are losing in the death of the old age, the familiar patterns and structures that sustained previous generations,
but that have become exhausted and dysfunctional, contains within it the seeds of what might emerge next. The task is not to preserve the dying forms intact, but rather to ensure that the essential seeds, the core wisdom and capabilities that remain valuable, are preserved through the transition and available to inform whatever grows from the dissolution we are experiencing. This requires discernment to distinguish between what must be released and what must be preserved, between forms that have outlived their usefulness and principles that remain eternally relevant. The Maya managed this successfully through their classic collapse, losing the elaborate hierarchies and massive construction projects that had characterized classic civilization, while preserving language, agricultural knowledge, astronomical wisdom, spiritual traditions, and social practices that continued to sustain Maya communities through centuries of dramatic change. Contemporary civilization faces similar need to identify what is essential and worth preserving versus what must be released to allow transformation and renewal. The communal nature of Maya ritual and ceremony offers another relevant insight for contemporary transformation. The observance of calendar stations and significant transitions involved entire communities in shared recognition of cosmic patterns and collective participation in maintaining balance and order. This shared awareness and coordinated response strengthened social cohesion and ensured that knowledge and practices necessary for successful navigation of transitions were widely distributed rather than confined to small elite groups. Contemporary responses to crisis often emphasize individual rather than collective action, placing responsibility on isolated persons to solve systemic problems through consumer choices and lifestyle modifications. While individual choices matter, the scale of transformation required demands collective action, shared commitment to systemic change, coordinated responses that draw on diverse capabilities and perspectives. The Maya model of community participation in recognizing and responding to significant transitions suggests the value of building shared awareness and coordinated responses rather than leaving individuals to struggle alone with challenges that transcend individual capacity to address. The emphasis on reciprocity and balance that characterized Maya relationships with natural systems and with each other offers guidance for restructuring contemporary relationships in more sustainable and equitable ways. The recognition that what we take from systems must be balanced by what we give back, that relationships function best when exchange flows in multiple directions rather than concentrating benefits in one location, that long-term sustainability requires maintaining the health and vitality of all participants rather than maximizing short-term extraction. These principles apply to relationships between humans and ecosystems, between different human communities, between present and future generations. Implementing these principles requires significant transformation in economic systems structured around extraction and accumulation rather than reciprocity and circulation. It demands changes in social arrangements that concentrate power and resources rather than distributing them according to need and contribution. It necessitates different time horizons that consider long-term sustainability rather than short-term profit.
Yet these transformations, though difficult, represent precisely the kind of change that completion of a world age demands. The shift from obsolete patterns to new forms better suited to sustaining life through conditions that the old forms can no longer successfully navigate. The Maya astronomical observations that enabled their sophisticated timekeeping also revealed the mathematical elegance and predictable order underlying cosmic processes, providing reassurance that despite surface chaos and unpredictability, existence operated according to knowable patterns and principles. This same reassurance remains available to contemporary civilization through scientific observation of natural laws and mathematical patterns that govern everything from quantum mechanics to galactic evolution. The universe operates according to comprehensible principles, even if our understanding remains incomplete, and this order provides foundation for hope that intelligence and careful observation can guide us through current challenges. Yet the Maya also understood that mathematical precision and careful observation must be balanced with spiritual awareness and ethical commitment,
that knowledge without wisdom leads to outcomes that may be technically impressive but spiritually empty or practically destructive. The integration of intellectual understanding with spiritual meaning-making, of practical capability with ethical reflection, represents another Maya gift to contemporary civilization, struggling to heal the fragmentations that divide knowledge from wisdom, capability from responsibility, progress from sustainability. As this long night draws toward its conclusion, as the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns undisturbed by human drama, as the first hint of dawn begins to pale the eastern horizon, we return to the fundamental insight that animated Maya prophecy and that remains relevant for our contemporary situation. Time moves in cycles, not lines. Endings are also beginnings. What appears to be catastrophe may be transformation. The death of obsolete forms creates space for new growth. Consciousness that learns to navigate between opposites, rather than clinging desperately to one pole or the other, develops resilience and wisdom that allows successful passage through transitions that destroy more rigid and inflexible systems. The Maya predicted not the end of the world, but the completion of an age and the beginning of another. They anticipated not supernatural destruction, but natural transformation. They called not for fear or resignation, but for awareness and appropriate response. They demonstrated through their own history that civilizations can survive catastrophic change when willing to release attachment to obsolete forms and embrace necessary transformation. They taught through their astronomical observations and cyclical calendars that existence moves according to patterns that can be understood and anticipated, that we are not helpless victims of chaos, but rather participants in orderly processes that we can learn to navigate with skill and wisdom. Their prophecy speaks most powerfully not in the specific date that captured apocalyptic imagination, but in the larger understanding it represents about the nature of time, change, and transformation. We are living, they would say, through exactly what their calendar predicted, the completion of one great cycle and the beginning of another, a threshold requiring attention and awareness, a transition demanding that we release our grip on the dying age and embrace the difficult but necessary work of birthing whatever comes next. The crisis we face is real. The challenge is genuine, the uncertainty profound. Yet crisis also means opportunity, the Chinese ideogram reminding us that danger and possibility intertwine inseparably. The dissolution of obsolete structures creates space for innovation. The loss of familiar patterns generates necessity that drives adaptation. The failure of old stories to inspire or guide opens hearing for new narratives that might better serve life and sustainability. The transformation occurring around and within us, though difficult and often painful, contains potential for breakthrough to enhanced consciousness and more sustainable and equitable ways of organizing human civilization. The hero twins emerged from their trials in Xibalba, transformed and ascended, taking their places as sun and moon, their daily presence guaranteeing that light would always return after darkness, that consciousness would always emerge from its descent into unknowing, that life would always renew itself after apparent death. We cannot know what forms will emerge from our contemporary passage through transformation and crisis, cannot predict with certainty whether we will successfully navigate the challenges we face, cannot guarantee that our descendants will look back on this age as the birth of something beautiful rather than as catastrophe and collapse. What we can know is that the patterns the Maya observed continue to operate, that cycles turn regardless of human wishes, that resistance to necessary transformation only makes the process more difficult and destructive, that wisdom lies in accepting change while maintaining connection to essential truths and practices that remain valuable regardless of surface forms. We can know that we are not the first humans to live through the ending of an age, that our ancestors navigated comparable transitions, and that their descendants survived to face new challenges. We can know that existence has survived far more dramatic transformations than anything contemporary human civilization might experience, that life has persisted through mass extinctions and planetary catastrophes, that consciousness has evolved through billions of years to reach its present expressions.
And we can know that we have choice, that while we cannot control all circumstances or guarantee outcomes, we can influence through our decisions and actions whether the transformation we are experiencing moves toward renewal or toward deeper crisis, whether we navigate this threshold with wisdom and compassion or with denial and conflict, whether we learn from the Maya example of accepting endings as transitions and working consciously to ensure that what emerges from dissolution serves life and sustainability. The night is ending, the stars fading as dawn approaches. Somewhere in the jungles of Guatemala or Mexico or Belize, descendants of the astronomers who created the long count calendar greet the sunrise with prayers and gratitude, maintaining traditions that have persisted through centuries of change and challenge. The pyramids stand empty of their original inhabitants, but still track the movements of sun and stars with mathematical precision, testament to the sophistication and dedication of the civilization that created them. The calendar continues its cycles, the great wheel turning, the 13th Baktun having completed and reset, the 14th now progressing through its early stages. The prophecy has neither failed nor been fulfilled in the manner apocalyptic interpreters imagined. It persists in the deeper truth it always represented, the recognition that existence moves in cycles, that ages complete and renew, that transformation through dissolution represents natural process rather than supernatural catastrophe, that human communities survive endings when willing to adapt and transform while maintaining connection to essential wisdom and practices. This truth remains relevant, becomes more relevant as contemporary civilization confronts its own moment of completion and transition, faces its own necessity of releasing obsolete patterns and embracing transformation toward forms better suited to changed conditions and capable of supporting life sustainably into uncertain futures. As you drift toward sleep, carried by the rhythm of these words like a boat floating on a gentle current, allow the wisdom of the Maya to settle into your consciousness, not as specific predictions or supernatural revelations, but as deeper understanding about the nature of time and transformation. Accept that you are living through the ending of an age and the difficult birth of another. Recognize that the uncertainty and disruption you experience are natural features of threshold periods, when one pattern dies and another struggles to emerge.
Release your grip on the dying forms and open your awareness to the seeds of new possibilities that are already germinating in the dissolution surrounding us. Know that you are not alone in this experience, that millions of humans before you have navigated comparable transitions, that your descendants will face their own transformations and challenges. Trust that existence continues through these cycles, that consciousness persists through apparent dissolutions, that life renews itself with extraordinary resilience and creativity. Embrace your role as participant in this transformation, accepting responsibility for your choices and actions, while releasing attachment to outcomes you cannot control. Work toward positive futures while accepting uncertainty about whether your efforts will achieve their intended results. The Maya astronomers who spent nights on temple platforms tracking the movements of stars and planets have long since dissolved into the same earth that received their ancestors before them, and that will eventually receive us all. But the patterns they observed continue. The cycles they calculated persist. The wisdom they accumulated remains available to those willing to learn from cultures different from our own, from civilizations that solved problems we still struggle with, from worldviews that integrated what we have fragmented. Their greatest gift to contemporary humanity may not be their calendar or their prophecies, but rather their example of living in conscious relationship with cosmic patterns, of accepting endings as transitions, of maintaining hope and commitment through difficult transformations, of understanding that human flourishing depends upon sustainable relationship with natural systems and with each other. These lessons remain eternally relevant, become more urgent as contemporary civilization confronts the consequences of having ignored them for too long. Let these thoughts settle gently as sleep approaches, integrating into your consciousness not as anxiety-producing fears, but as comfort and orientation, helping you understand that what you are experiencing in your life and in your world is part of larger patterns that have repeated throughout history, and that will continue to repeat as long as existence persists. You are living through something significant, certainly, but not unprecedented or hopeless. Humans have navigated comparable challenges before, and their descendants survived to face new obstacles and opportunities. You carry within you the same resilience and adaptability that sustained your ancestors through their transformations. Trust that capacity. Draw upon it. Contribute your own choices and actions to the collective human effort to navigate this threshold toward outcomes that serve life and sustainability. The night is ending. Dawn is approaching. The cycle continues.
Sleep now and rest in the knowledge that light always returns after darkness, that consciousness emerges renewed from its descent into unknowing, that life persists through transformations that destroy surface forms while preserving essential patterns and possibilities. The Maya understood this truth, encoded it in their calendars and prophecies, demonstrated it through their survival of their own catastrophes. Their wisdom remains available, whispering across centuries, offering comfort and guidance for those willing to listen and learn. Before you drift completely into sleep, as consciousness relaxes its grip on ordinary awareness, consider taking a moment, when you wake refreshed and renewed, to share this journey with others who might benefit from Maya wisdom about cycles and transformation. A simple gesture, pressing the like button, subscribing to this channel, allows these stories and insights to reach others who might be seeking comfort and orientation in uncertain times. Your small action contributes to larger patterns of information sharing and community building that help collective human consciousness evolve toward greater wisdom and understanding. But these concerns can wait until morning, until the sun has risen and consciousness returned from its nightly journey through realms of dream and restoration. For now, simply rest, cradled in the knowledge that you are part of cycles far larger than individual human experience, that your life unfolds within patterns that have sustained existence through countless transformations, that consciousness continues through apparent dissolutions, that endings are also beginnings, that what appears to be catastrophe may be transformation towards something new and potentially beautiful, if we can navigate the transition with wisdom and courage. Sleep deeply, dream peacefully, and know that you will wake to a new day carrying within it the same possibilities that have always existed for those willing to perceive and embrace them. The prophecy continues, not in supernatural predictions, but in the eternal truth that time moves in cycles, that ages complete and renew, that transformation persists as the fundamental nature of existence itself.